And this next section is many that confirms what we warned about in this show, and how it's all around money. Both some who have far too much and the most who have not enough. And as we warned in Clowns in Panic, in fact, people should keep listening to that show because it's getting confirmed now on an almost bi-daily basis. And the American billionaires saw their fortunes soar by 434 billion during the US lockdown between mid-March and mid-May. 434 billion in 2 months. That tells you what they were doing. Predictably, Bezos and Zuckerberg, with a silent F, had the biggest gains, with Bezos adding 34.6 billion to his wealth and Zuckerberg adding 25 billion. According to a report from Americans for Tax Fairness, that's a laugh, and the Institute for Policy Studies Programme for Inequality. And the report is based on Forbes data for America's more than 600 billionaires between March 18 and May 19th. Now, the billionaire gains highlight how the coronavirus pandemic was rewarded the largest and most tech-focused companies. Isn't that what we warned of in Clowns in Panic? And even as the economy and labour force grapples with the worst economic crisis in recent history, according to the report, the net worth of Americans' billionaires grew 15% during a 2-month period. 15%. To 3.382 trillion from 2.948 trillion. And the biggest gains are at the top of the billionaire pyramid. Again, that's what the Clowns in Panic mentioned, did we not? It's a top-end billionaires game. And Bezos, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg with a silent F, Warren Buffett, which someone would eat him, and Larry Ellison. And yes, they have common denominators, I think you all know by now. And seeing combined wealth gains of 76 billion. Elon Musk had the largest percentage gain of billionaires during the 2 months, seeing his net worth jump by 48% to 36 billion. Zuckerberg was close behind, seeing his wealth surge by 46% in 2 months to 80 billion, and Bezos increased his wealth by 31% to 147 billion. Who needs 147 billion? You know, it's just sick. And Bezos's ex-wife, Mackenzie Bezos, who received Amazon shares in their divorce, also saw her wealth increase by a third to 48 billion. Snakes, a lot of them. The political appointee President Trump installed last week to investigate waste, fraud and abuse at the Transportation Department is the same official in charge of one of the agency's key divisions. And that means Howard Skip Elliott is now running an office charged with investigating his own actions. Sounds like the police. Now, Elliott serves simultaneously as the Transportation Department's Inspector General and also head of the department's Pipeline and Hazardous Material Agency, whose mission includes enforcement of safety regulations on nearly 1 million daily shipments of gas, oil, and other dangerous compounds. And according to the government oversight, which there is none, the idea that an independent IG could simultaneously be part of a political team running an agency they are opposed to oversee is preposterous. And that's according to Daniel Bryan, who is executive director of the non-profit Project on Government Oversight. Now, Elliott's appointment was the fifth in 2 months in which Trump bothered from oversight he perceived as criticism, replaced a career investigator with an appointee considered more loyal to the president. And in 3 of the cases, Trump has installed new leadership drawn from senior ranks of the agencies the Inspector General oversees. Now, for the first time since the system was created in the aftermath of the Watergate scandal, Inspectors General found themselves under systematic attack from the president, putting independent oversight, they say, of federal spending and operations at risk, as over $2 trillion in coronavirus relief spending courses through the government. It's not $2 trillion. It's just not. As forecast 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago now, about the stimulus checks not coming out. They're still not out, are they? And neither is unemployment. But what we have to do is everyone must be accountable. And is it a case of just trust the plan, or does this, like quite a few other actions, raise some concerns? The Pompeo protection, the most recent. Should we just trust the plan? Your choice. Although I am pleased at Trump calling Antifa a terrorist organisation. But again, the question remains is, why has it taken 4 years to do so? And here's their latest episode to justify that they haven't got the money. With thousands of Washington state residents, this person's identity, it is said, is used by criminals seeking to capitalize on a flood of legitimate unemployment claims by sneaking in fraudulent ones. And Washington's race to help newly laid off residents as the coronavirus pandemic ravaged the economy, they said, left it vulnerable to such scams. And last week officials hinted at the scope of it. And what they're saying is hundreds of millions of dollars were paid out in fake claims. Yeah, right. And much of it apparently went to the West African fraud ring, which is sponsored by Langley, I might add, Nigeria, using identities stolen in prior data breaches, such as the massive 2017 Equifax breach. And state and federal authorities have tried to claw back as much money as possible and say they have blocked hundreds of millions more from being paid out. But Washington's experience is nevertheless a cautionary tale, they say. But isn't it ironic or coincidental? They have suddenly unearthed all kinds of scams and hacking to explain away the still not fully paid out stimulus checks, which is now 8 weeks. The delays to people's social security payments being reported all around the country, and massive delays to the unemployment. Funny that, isn't it? Well, actually it's not. And people need to wake up to the reality of what's going on. And here's another state. ran by a bunch of snakes. And California, in their wisdom, despite being one of the richest states in the country, if not the, has become the first state to borrow money from the federal government so it can continue paying out rising claims for unemployment benefits during the pandemic. That makes a lot of sense, does it? And the Golden State borrowed $348 million in federal funds after receiving approval to tap up to $10 billion for this purpose through the end of July, according to a Treasury Department spokesman. Of course, the Treasury would give California money because Munchkin is in with Pelosi is why. And the US government has also approved loans of up to $12.6 billion for Illinois and up to $1.1 billion for Connecticut. No surprise there. Another of the richest states where all the clowns reside, or large portions of them, put it that way, through to the end of July to replenish state unemployment insurance. Through to the end of July should be noted, because that's telling you it's going to go on till at least till the end of July, is it not? Like Munchkin turning around and saying your $1,200 is to last 10 weeks. Well, that's the middle of June. And now they're talking about the end of July. Now, California was the only state to have accessed the program so far in the current downturn, according to the Treasury spokesman. That is the Ouroboros programs again, of stealing from one fund to pay another. But the question is, what happens next? Who do you think is going to pay all this back? Yes, the people. Former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang says the United States should seriously look at 4-day work weeks. 3-day weekends are better than 2-day weekends, he said, and we should seriously look at 4-day weeks. Studies show that we would be just as productive, Yang tweeted, and it would create jobs at the margins and improve mental health. Now, the former White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci, will we do the fandango, agreed with Yang's workweek proposal. Of course they would. I wonder where they got that from. 4-day week. And the hashtag Yang Gang is a force to be reckoned with in 2024, according to Mr. Scaramucci. And data shows 4-day work weeks increases efficiency, job creation, and mental health. And that guy just gets it, he said. Last week, as the story points out, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern floated the idea of a 4-day work week there as well. Ardern pushed for companies to consider such new policies as a possible way to stimulate domestic tourism after the coronavirus pandemic. I'd really encourage you to think about that, she said, if you're an employer and in a position to do so, if that's something that would work for your workplace. How interesting a politician would mention that just after our TPC Part 2 video mentioning the same thing. But they are going and are suggesting it for quite differing reasons, as they know that many jobs and businesses will not be returning anytime soon. And that is their reasoning for mentioning it. And so let's keep many of the masses happy by reducing everyone's job to 4-day weeks, and let's spread the jobs thinly to make it look like everyone's got jobs. You see how they work? Now, the staggering reality of the damage this fake virus and fake lockdown has done was revealed by CNBC this week, of the unemployment figures and the recent economic downturn, which was going to happen anyway. Make no mistake about that. It was going to happen regardless. And the article says it has disproportionately impacted women and minorities in the US. And new data reveals that the coronavirus pandemic has hit parents especially hard. And experts say it's going to be especially challenging for those households to return to work. About 51.7 million Americans who live in households with children under the age of 18 say that either they or someone in their home experienced a loss of employment income since Trump declared the coronavirus pandemic a national emergency on March the 13th. And the latest census survey shows that 40 million adults with kids in the house expect they or another member of the household will continue to lose or start to lose income in the next 4 months. And they said this isn't surprising considering that experts predict Americans with children will face some of the biggest hurdles as companies require employees to head back to the office. Even as they attempt to go back to work, they don't have any way of rejoining the labour force because in fact they still are caring for children at home. And that's according to Diane Swunk, chief economist with Grant Thornton. And about 60% of parents in the US have had no outside help caring for their children during the pandemic, according to a recent survey from Boston Consulting Group. We'll have more on that article later. Boeing, it was going down the pan anyway, in case people can't remember before the fake pandemic. But Boeing announced on Wednesday it's eliminating more than 12,000 US jobs, including 6,770 US layoffs, as the largest American plane maker restructures, which is what they were always going to do anyway, downsizing, decentralizing. Remember that from Clowns in Panic? And Boeing also disclosed its plans of several thousand remaining layoffs in the next few months, but did not say where those will be. Now, the company announced in April it cut 10% of its worldwide workforce of 160,000 by the end of 2020, and Boeing said it had approved 5,520 US employees to take voluntary layoffs, and they will leave Boeing in the coming weeks. It also disclosed it's notifying 6,770 workers this week of involuntary layoffs. And Boeing is moving to cut costs as it faces a drop in airplane demand from the pandemic. No, it couldn't be because some of their planes started to crash at regular intervals. On we go. It's all about the money. And it's going to become all about the jobs, as the warnings that we've been given in the show is now slapping us all in the face. But retailers are expected to close more than 3,600 stores this year, following record high rates of closing last year. So far, more than 9,300 store closings were announced in the US in 2019, which smashed the previous record of roughly 8,000 store closures in 2017. Now, the number of store closings this year could be even higher than previous records, according to estimates from the real estate firm Cushman & Wakefield, and the firm estimated last year, prior to the virus, that as many as 12,000 major chain stores could close in 2020 as the Amazon virus creeps up on all of it. Again, that was warned of in Clowns in Panic, was it not? But this pandemic is now putting even more stores in danger of closing as retailers grapple with dramatic drops in sales, and retail companies have so far confirmed at least 3,600 stores stated for closure in 2020. And then we go to the other end of the scale. As everyone's losing their business, other snakes are gaining. The multi-billion-dollar institute in the Seattle area invests in hedge funds, and it runs a pair of venture capital funds and works with elite private equity firms like the Carlyle Group, Bush. But this is not just another deep-pocketed investor hunting for high returns. It is the Providence Health System, one of the country's largest and richest hospital chains. Therein lies the problem right in itself. Hospitals and clinics should be non-profit, not one of the largest, richest core pirates. And Providence Health System is sitting on nearly $12 billion in cash, which it invests Wall Street style in a good year, generating more than $1 billion a year in profits, and still charging people vast amounts for poor service. Remember, the third leading cause of death, and that hasn't been declared a pandemic in any year, is medical malpractice. Now, after this spring, Providence, despite earning $1 billion in profits on its investments, received $509 million in government funds. Again, therein lies the problem, doesn't it? And it was one of the many wealthy beneficiaries of a federal program that is supposed to prevent healthcare providers from capsizing during the pandemic, with states restricting hospitals from performing elective surgery and other non-essential services. Their revenue has shriveled, and the Department of Health and Human Services has disbursed $72 billion in grants since April to hospitals and other healthcare providers through the, quote, bailout program, unquote. That's where all your money's gone. Same people, same groups, same program. And that was part of the CARES Act. Yeah, they don't care, is the correct analogy of that. The CARES Act economic stimulus package. In other words, as they said, a bailout of a multi-billion-dollar business that has $12 billion just sitting around in cash. Now, the department plans to eventually distribute more than $100 billion more, and so far the riches are flowing in large parts to hospitals that had already built up deep financial reserves to help them withstand an economic storm, and they still took the money. Meanwhile, smaller, poorer hospitals are receiving tiny amounts of federal aid by comparison, and 20 large recipients, including Providence, has received a total of more than $5 billion in recent weeks, according to analysis of federal data by Good Jobs First. And those hospital chains were already sitting on more than $108 billion in cash, according to regulatory filings and the bond rating firms S&P Global and Fitch. Now, a Providence spokeswoman said the grants helped make up for the losses from the coronavirus. Really? There's your tax dollars at work. Yet again, giving to the rich and ignoring the majority. Even after 4 years of government, it hasn't changed. Attacks on East Asian people living in the US have shot up during the pandemic, revealing an uncomfortable truth about the American identity. And although she was born in the US, nothing about Tracy Wen Liu's life in the country felt un-American. She went to football games, watched Sex and the City, volunteered at food banks before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 31-year-old didn't think anything of being East Asian and living in Austin, Texas. And she said, honestly, I didn't really think I stood out a lot. But that has changed with the outbreak of the pandemic that has killed allegedly around 100,000 people, most of them murdered in care homes, as we revealed in the expose show. Being Asian in America can make you a target, and many, including Ms. Liu, have felt it. And in her case, she says a Korean friend was pushed and yelled at by several people in a grocery store and then asked to leave simply because she was Asian and wore a mask. In states including New York, California and Texas, East Asians have been spat on, punched or kicked, and in one case even stabbed. Whether they have been faced with outright violence, bullying or more insidious forms of social or political abuse, a spike in anti-Asian prejudice has left many Asians wondering where they fit into American society. I wish people would just stop that nonsense. And this is where the portal people remain unaccountable. Was they create that? But people have to realise that people are not the problem and need to show some backbone and attack those who created this to begin with. Let's all point at this country. Let's all point at that country. Let's all point at so-called illegal aliens. How can you be illegal on your own planet? Let's blame Muslims. And on it goes. Let's blame the system that created it. Arizona has been in the news this week and filed a lawsuit against GoOgle, accusing it of illegally collecting smartphone users' location data, according to General Attorney Mark Brinovich. And the lawsuit claims GoOgle violated Arizona's consumer fraud laws by tracking users' locations even when they had disabled location tracking settings, and demands GoOgle repay any money it has made as a result. Again, did we not warn of that in the Clowns in Panic show? Tracking users' locations even when they had disabled location tracking settings. It's unreal. Here's another thing we warned about in Clowns in Panic. Coming a common theme, is it not? Microsoft is to replace dozens of contract journalists on its MSN website and use automated systems to select news stories. Here comes the robot world. The curating of stories from news organisations and selection of headlines and pictures for the MSN site is currently done by journalists. Read Langley scriptwriters. There are no journalists anymore. And what they have said is artificial intelligence will perform these news production tasks, according to the Seattle Times. And Microsoft said it was part of an evaluation of its business. This is where they slip these things in as a crisis unfolds. Like they slipped in many things in 2001, like the Patriot Act, and many things during World War II, like the UN and banking procedures, etc., etc. The US tech giant said in a statement, like all companies, we evaluate our business on a regular basis, and this can result in increased investment in some places and from time to time redeployment in others, and these decisions are not the result of the current pandemic. No, they're not, because it was arranged prior, like everything else. Now, Microsoft, like some other tech companies, pays news organisations to use their content on its website, but it employs journalists to decide which stories to display and how they are presented. And around 50 contract news producers will lose their jobs at the end of June, but a team of full-time journalists will remain. I would take note of that, because you're going to see that a lot more. 2 Remington rifle owners are asking a federal judge to revisit a landmark class action settlement involving millions of allegedly defective guns. And this after CNBC reported that multiple customers have complained to the company about their guns malfunctioning even after they were repaired under the settlement. Anyone wonder if this was done deliberately? CNN reporter, Clinton News Network, and his production team were arrested in Minneapolis this week for what the media says just doing their jobs, and despite identifying themselves a clear violation of their First Amendment rights. It's funny they'll spout it when it affects them, but it won't but deny the people same opportunities. And the authorities in Minnesota, including the governor, must release the 3 Clinton News Network employees immediately. Oh my. The Roths and the Black Sun groups fighting now, spreading to the portal people. Scientists working at Oxford-based Jenner Institute, and you already are aware that these institutes are not for them by the people, are racing against the clock to try to create a coronavirus vaccine before anyone else. Obviously for the good of mankind and not the enormous profits such a vaccine could reap. And yes, I'm being sarcastic. Now, reports that Oxford was proceeding to the second stage of human trials for the coronavirus vaccine, which would see the number of participants rise to 10,000 people, were met with optimism there. And Oxford's Jenner Institute is working with the drug company AstraZeneca to develop the vaccine. Now, the government projected that the vaccine, if successful, could deliver 30 million doses by September. I guess we're going to have Red October again. Or is it the October surprise that gets run in the alt media every year for over a decade now and nothing happens? However, there's just one problem with this, is the virus is now dying out, and the scientists are concerned that any chance of doing a meaningful trial for a vaccine is dying out with it. It's all about the money and control, you see. Final item before we go into a music break and extended intel is tens of thousands of COVID-19 tests have been double counted in the government's official tally. Public health officials have admitted this week double counting. And diagnostic tests which involve taking saliva and nasal samples from the same patient are being counted as 2 tests. Of course, there'll be 2 fees for that when they bill the government. You see how it works? And the Department of Health and Social Care, which is a misnomer in and of itself, and Public Health England each confirmed the double counting. And this inflates the daily reported diagnostic tests by over 20%. Well, if you're double counting, it's 50. Common Core math again. It beggars belief. With that proportion being much higher earlier on in the crisis, before home test kits were added to the daily totals, almost 350,000 more tests have been reported in government data than people tested. So only 175,000 were tested, but I bet they billed 350. And the discrepancy is in large part explained by the practice of counting saliva and nasal samples for the same individual twice. You know, you can't fix stupid. And Simple Simon is the government.